sorted with all my paraphernalia here. So it's my real honour to be speaking with Beverley here today in front of all of you, talking about her career as a writer, and the talk the conversation that we're going to have, we've titled Challenging Ways of Seeing, because I think we wanted to draw out some of the ways in which reading can challenge your perspectives, can offer new perspectives and new ways of thinking. So, as it's been said, I'm sure Beverley doesn't really need much of an introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. Beverley is an award-winning author of children's books from a career that spans the last 4 decades. She's an author of 19 children's books, which include chapter books, picture books, and collections of short stories, as well as 3 works of non-fiction. She's most celebrated for her chapter book fiction, which includes her first novel, Journey to Joburg, The Other Side of Truth, which won the Carnegie Medal in the year 2000, and most recently, Children of the Stone City, which came out in October 2022. I had the great honour of studying Beverley's work for my PhD, and I hope we can all gain some great insights from this conversation today. So, you were born in South Africa, and I wonder if you could take us through the first picture that you've chosen here and start by telling us a bit about your childhood and the context in which you grew up.
Right, well, thank you, Helen. Yeah, it's great fun to be here with Helen. Helen knows a lot about me because she's been in the paper, more than it's paper that I've stuffed away there. Yeah, so born in South Africa, and I was born what I call a permitted. This colour skin, I don't need to talk much about apartheid, but this colour skin, I was born a permitted. And that meant that I was born with all kinds of blinkers. I was born with colonial blinkers that are passed down. So that little child born 6,000 miles away from Europe, in Joburg, connected directly right here. Sorry, I've lost the accent, but I did grow up for a while because my mom was in the SABC, the South African Broadcasting Corporation, and you were meant to speak with a kind of proper English accent. And my parents were in the arts. Didn't live in a great big pink house like you might have seen in Journey to Joburg, but actually in a small rented flat in the days of rent control. And but because they were in the arts, they got invited into the grand mansions and homes of Johannesburg, which of course had been built on gold. Now, Joburg, way off to the east there, Joburg, this is the valley of my imagination, because my parents, when they could get away from Joburg, would take us into this valley. Not this precise spot, but very nearly by there. And the orange farm, in the distance there, you can see an orange farm. There's rows and rows and rows and straight rows. That's the valley through which Naidoo and Tiro walk on their way to try and get their mother from Joburg. Of course, the apartheid, one of the worst crimes, breaking up families. And but I was a child who would have been allowed to run in the orange field. I would have been the child who would pick the oranges and maybe get a little bit of chicken. Not nothing big. But of course, those children, the Naidoo and Tiro, young black South African children, no way allowed into that orange field. So this is, so I've had to learn the blinkers. They're invisible. You don't see them as a child, do you? Wherever you were, I don't see those blinkers. But there's the, what's his name? Leonard Cohen. The ending of that wonderful anthem that he writes. You know, it's on the birds they sing, and it ends with saying, it's the cracks that let the light in. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking over my time. What were the cracks that began to let the light in? That made me begin to realize that this little world that was like this for me, maybe for you too, Diane, you know, that suddenly what was it that cracked that kind of, oh my goodness. So I grew up here. It was only when, I'm not sure you've got some other photos. Let's just go to the next photo and let's see. Okay, there we go. Could have been me, not me, but it could have been me. I'm showing us pictures of children all the time. One of those women is her second mom, probably the lady with the blackberry, of course, allowed to sit on the white only step like this bench there, you know, the 2 white tribes in South Africa, and my second mother, Master Bati, you know, and to whom Journey to Joburg was dedicated. That image from childhood when she collapsed next to me, having received a telegram, very appropriate on the answers there when we're thinking about people who receive telegrams. She received a telegram, her heart must have banged against her chest to know that actually it would be bad news. It was. 2 of her 3 daughters, 3 and 5-year-old, had died from diphtheria. It was a disease, of course, which I, with this colour skin, had been inoculated. Her children hadn't. At the time, did I realise, age 11, had I been reading a book like Journey to Joe? No. But, did I realise, of course I felt sorry. Of course, that she was sobbing next to me. Yes, I felt sorry. But did I understand that I'd been made complicit in a system that denied her that right to have her children with her? That took more time. So maybe next.
So next here, you've been speaking about some of the cracks that start to form, and I wonder if you could start to talk about some of the books that were informing your worldview when you were growing up.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. Yes, so that European world, I've still got it, the Andrew Lang fairy, the blue fairy book. And maybe that's what, because I have done some retelling of stories in my time, and I actually love it. And maybe that's what also the sense that there has to be hope. And actually the European tales give you generally 3 chances, not so much with the African tales. You mess up and whoops, that's it. But that blue fairy book, very important to me. The Diary of Anne Frank, probably the first book that told me that literature could be about real life. And of course, fiction at all. But that sense that thinking, my goodness, that could be me. My mom was Jewish. She kept a maid then working in the kind of the South African Broadcasting Corporation, which was full of people, some of them had probably been locked up during the Second World War for supporting the Nazis. So that kind of impacted me. And I loved her youthful voice. What a voice to do with Pages of Protest. Her saying, what is the point of war? Where is the money to be spent on poor people, to be spent on artists? Thank you very much, Anne Frank. Where is that? It goes in the war. She would be distressed, I think, beyond words of what's happening in our world today. But you know what? Those invisible blinkers, did I actually look and see then? My goodness, what's going on in South Africa while I'm crying over Anne 6,000 miles away? No, I didn't. That took further time, I must have been introduced to her at about 11 or so. It took years later before I began to actually see what was, the cracks began to come in what was much more in it should have been in my vision. And then, of course, books are part of the process. So it starts at university. Well, it actually starts with my brother. He's a bit older, so I didn't take any notice of him. He's just an older brother. But, and I did the conventional thing in South Africa. Oh, you must be a communist. You must be a commie. That was, if you read One Day, Lily, One Day. Jane, I'm not so fortunate to have had a brilliant editor, Jane Listener Puffin, and I think you were editing me by the time I did the short stories for Out of Bounds. And that story, the story One Day, Lily, One Day, goodness gracious, there was a massacre not far from where I was growing up in Joburg, Sharpeville. That Sharpeville massacre. Did I know anything about it? No. I'm a schoolgirl, my last year at school. I'm 17. Am I aware that there's a massacre there? No. So then I have to ask the question, what is it that? How is it that we can be so, not see what actually should be in our vision? But thank goodness it began, those cracks happened, there was getting to university, there's the whole story about that, I think. One of their books became popular. That was banned at the time, down Second Avenue. It's been printed, I think, in East Germany. Esker und Schneller, he wrote then under Esker und Schneller. It's his childhood autobiography. My goodness, that hit me. How come I didn't know this? His childhood could be on another planet. And yet it was actually down the road from where I was. So, and then I was introduced to later the African child, because of course the rest of Africa didn't exist. From South Africa, I connected right into Europe. It's like, the rest of Africa was a complete blank. Look at the Ladybird books. books from those times, and you'll see it literally is blanked out. I think that, in fact, Egypt is almost taken into Europe. If you look at the pictures of how, when Egypt was told that story. The African Child, one of the first books I read when I came over here, great Harry Ray, he must be turning in his grave as to what's happening in schooling here. And he recommended, he said, had I read it? And I hadn't. And I picked it up. And because he suggested I do education with English, I come to exile here. And I suddenly thought, wow, so can education be about culture? Whoa, maybe I'm going to be interested in education after all. It wasn't the kind of control, mind control that I'd experienced as a young person growing up. And then a little bit later, when I did my thesis, and the PhD research, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. That's one of the books I wanted 13-year-olds to read, because I thought, wow, what if I had read that book when I was 13? What would it have made an impact on me? What impact might it make? So I did a whole research project into looking at, we authors are nothing without our readers. It's our readers who bring our books alive. And so, yes, I think I better pass to you.
Yeah, so you've talked a bit about some of the literature, but there's also the political, there's also a lot of the political influences that were on you as a young person prior to coming to the UK. I wonder if you could talk us through some of those.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. Here's just one picture, many that I could have selected. Helen Joseph, born in Sussex, and she, in South Africa, I can't tell you with what's happening in Israel and Palestine, how much I realise, how thankful I am that in South Africa we had the Congress movement. And it brought people from the different groups. There was apartheid, colonialism before that, but separating us, pitting one against the other. The Congress movement defied that, absolute defiance of it. And Helen Joseph, she'd come, marched to Pretoria, 1955, with a black woman, helps declare South Africa's Freedom Charter in 1955. What an extraordinary document. We, the people of South Africa, declare for the world to hear that the land is for us all to share, black and white. I mean, this is colonial South Africa. What an extraordinary vision that there were people who said that actually, if we don't share this land, where are we going to be? So here we are. And look at this, because we tend to just, our media tends to focus us and narratives tend to focus on one person. There's Nelson Mandela, before going into life imprisonment. All these people, all these men, but then of course there were women, but in this particular Beverley trial, which is now happening, I've begun to become aware, and these people then become very important to me, that there are people who are prepared to to spend their lives in jail. Well, they're actually prepared to take a death sentence, if need be. And the ideals that they are is about a shared South Africa. How are we going to share it? With equality and justice. And majority of them would have been classified black African, but you've got African Rider, from India, Muslim family from there, and then Dennis Goldberg, far right. People came from the same place my mom's people would have come from. In fact, his mother went into prison the first time he was arrested. His mum's arrested at the same time, into a different prison. And so, these, my brother then meets up with Dennis Goldberg in Pretoria, and serving life sentences. So, I think just to know that there was an older generation there, and people who were prepared, who had very deep beliefs about a land that should be equal and just. That was hugely important to me. And so they were permitted, who said no, not in my name. I call the rest of the people, as you find when we come to children with Sperm City, noms.
So we're going to make quite a time jump here. So I know that year, 1964, was when you became quite involved in student activism in South Africa at your time at university, and I know that
small fish.
Yes,
Very small.
I know that you were briefly detained, and then soon after decided to come to the UK and study education and become teacher, and there's a 20-year period here between you coming to the UK and then publishing your first novel, Journey to Joburg. And we're not going to talk a huge amount about your teaching career, but I think one of the things that I've seen from your spending so much time with your work is the ways in which that was formative for you in terms of the things you wanted to write about and the children that you wanted to write for. And it's been interesting to see the way that your interactions with young people have continued to inform your work. So I think we're going to get onto that a little bit. But I wonder if you might briefly tell us a little bit about Journey to Joburg and what it meant to you.
Okay. Thank you. So this book came about because I was angry. And as I keep saying, as I do say to young people, if you're angry, find something creative to do. Don't destroy yourself with the anger. Find something creative, one way or another, to create something new. And I joined up with the anti-apartheid movement then. And I was horrified to find that the books on our shelves, we're talking back in the early 80s now, the late 70s, the books on our shelves, the so-called non-fiction, they gave a completely anaesthetised picture of South Africa. If I was blunt, I might say they were lying, but maybe those authors too, they simply omitted to tell young readers about apartheid. They would show the beautiful countryside, indeed it is a beautiful countryside, but they just wanted to tell you about how that countryside, you can enjoy that countryside and what it means to live in that country. And so we started off with a project. I went to the British Defence and Aid Fund for South Africa, started by Canon Collins of St Paul's Cathedral, and which was saying, collecting money for the defence of political prisoners and getting money to the families of those political prisoners. And I told them about the research, and then the question came, well, what can we do about this? And we had a discussion, very small group. Ethel de Kaiser, some of you may be fortunate to have met this extraordinary woman, Ethel. She fully viewed like anything, but my goodness, for the right reasons. And said, so what's to be done? And we all said, well, let's go for a work, all of us, three of us, a work of fiction. Let's go for the heart and let the mind follow and the questions follow. And who can write a book? Anyone here can write? No. And then I broke my hand. And he said, so, have you written for children before? I said, no, Ethel, no, there's a story I'd like to tell. Do you think you can do this, said Ethel? Well, I don't know, Ethel, I'd like to try. Right, she said, it was September 1981. She said, right, well, we're having another meeting in December. Can you come with something then? Right, Ethel, I said, I'll try. And that was the beginning of Journey to Joburg. And I felt incredibly fortunate because then, I had access to people to ask, to think, and you would have seen it, Helen, some of those kind of letters that I was writing around to find out about things. And so that was the beginning of Journey. And then the most amazing responses, because I think what we wanted to do, we wanted to engage young people. And so in came, this was one of the very, very first, it was a drawing from the school, it was a child in Islington. Just, wow. All I can say is wow. Yeah.
So this brings us forward to 1991. I think that's when this picture is from.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it says there, 1991. Which is when you were, the first time you were able to return to South Africa to speak with young people, to visit schools, to visit educational institutions, and to speak to those young people about that book, about Journey to Joburg.
It had just been unbanned.
Yes. Yeah, it was the first year that it was able to be distributed in South Africa. And this image is one of those scenes of that novel being workshopped. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit about that.
Sure. Fate. Fate put me on a coach going from, anyway, I think it was probably the headquarters of the Congress of South African Writers, going to do a weekend workshop in which you were going to produce a book. We were printing teams of 4, editor, writer, illustrator, and a teacher, and to come up with a book. And I had the great good fortune of finding myself sitting next next to Martha McCullough, and we just kind of hit it off. She'd been given this book there's an organisation, a literacy organisation, and she'd been told it's very hot, very hot. I actually asked the people in that organisation, oh great, so can you put this book into your book packs for Soweto, the Soweto school? And I said, no, we have to be very careful what our funders think. Anyway, Martha had been given a book, told it was very, very hot, and she said to me, would you like me to workshop it? She was working with young people who'd actually helped bring down the school system in South Africa. These were young people, largely from Alex, and they, you know, they'd been making trouble for their teachers and for that whole apartheid regime. And she'd studied Paulo Freire, and she had the most wonderful way of working with young people. And so over a weekend, she said, I won't tell them that you're a writer. I said, no, no, no. She said, I'll just say you're a friend from London. I said, fine. And she used drama techniques. And I saw Journey to Joburg being recreated in front of my eyes. Whoa, what a kind of affirmation. And at the end then, because she said she was interested in creating critical readers, and so at the end she then said, well, actually, Beverley, yeah, she actually wrote this book. Now, have you got any questions for her? Any critiques? And they did come up with one. Someone said, well, why don't children go and consult a traditional healer first of all? And you know what I said? You know, if you'd be my consultant and I'd be able to talk to you, I might have brought that, I could have brought that in, couldn't I? Sorry. And I think, yes, but it set me off to realise the power of drama. And actually, there's so much also what's unsaid, and actually be able to listen, to observe, so yeah, it set me off on a new course.
You want to tell us about this one as well?
Yeah, okay. So we've now got Mandela's released. South Africa, we knew that there were going to be democratic elections, so all the parents and all the children were going to be able to go and vote. And I thought, right, next story is I need to see this period through the eyes of a street child. A child who's literally just been thrown out. And I knew nothing of street children. I didn't belong to streets. I knew nothing. I had to immerse myself and find out about that world. So I returned to South Africa, and this great friend of mine, who I worked here in education here, theatre director, Nigerian origin, but broad, British, Olushola Oyele. And we basically set out. We offered workshops across South Africa. The main thing is we wanted to work with children of all backgrounds. And we saw kids on the street who would stop and talk, and so here we were chatting to Marvin. I don't have time to tell you, but there was such a heart-rending story around Marvin. And then here we went to Orange Grove Primary School in Joburg. That had been formerly white. It was one of the schools that opened its doors before the legislation actually was passed. Do you know what the white parents did? They removed all their kids. The teachers were the same. The equipment was the same. The school was the same. They just removed all their kids. There was one white child who was left in the school. And these kids, again, were doing workshops, drama, writing workshops, and they were just absolutely wonderful. Never forgot Shireen, the person from the right, who said, why do they have children if they're going to throw them away? And they invited us. I should have bought my little, I meant to actually, it would have been a good day to wear it, the little peace badge. You know, they invited us to go and join them at a peace rally, being addressed by Walter Sisulu, who was one of the people who was sent to life imprisonment with Mandela. And they gave us this little badge.
Can I say something about this?
Please, yeah.
So I've read some of the some extracts of the work that these young people did when Beverley and Shola went to visit them, and there's a lot. They have really strong opinions about the future of their country. Really, really strong opinions, and that's something that I've been thinking about today in the light of what we've been talking about over the course of today, is that if you ask children, they have answers to a lot of these political questions, like what do you want the future of your country to look like? And so that was one of the things that fascinated me about this particular group of young people.
I'll just say very briefly on this. So this following year, I now had a draft of No Turning Back, and I asked Martha if she would, would she like to workshop this if I brought it back? She created the most wonderful workshop with her barefoot teachers. She called them barefoot teachers. You can see the influence of Freire on that. So I attended a day where they were workshopping amongst themselves, a workshop that they would take into the primary school, Dr. Knapp, which is in Alex. And here, this is in the course of one of the workshops, this is one of the barefoot teachers, a couple of barefoot teachers had devised such a simple activity, but it was illuminating. She'd just got these two kids, one had to say please, and beg for something, please, in different ways in which you could say please, and the other to say no. No, all the different ways. And they were going through this kind of, this interjection of, please and no. And then, of course, always discussing afterwards. What do you learn from that? What do you see from that? So it's not the dialogue that comes out of it, the conversation that comes out of it. And then, oh yes, right.
So we're going to jump forward again in time here. So No Turning Back, which you just talked about, was was that the last novel that you published that was about South Africa?
Out of Bounds, a short story.
Yes, Out of Bounds. Yeah, as well.
It took me a little bit further on, but
the late 90s brought for you what I see as quite a change in direction and a focus on the UK as a subject matter. So I wonder if you could talk a bit more about what prompted that and the novels that came out of that.
Right, so what prompted that was I decided, okay, South Africa has had its first democratic election. I'm going to just let South Africa get on with it now for a while. And I just thought, I saw this, 14th of December 1997, there were two articles in the Observer by Natasha Walter, who incidentally has now set up Refugee Children for Refugee Women, an organisation around refugees and women. And it was about child refugees in British jails. I thought, what? Here? I've been focused on children locked up in South African jails. What? They lock children up here? And so I thought, okay, I've got to find out about this. And that is what then led me into here. Because the other picture, I think I forgot to put it, is 1995. This is the year after Mandela was elected as the first president in South Africa. There's Ken Saro-Wiwa being executed by the military government in Nigeria with 8 or 9 other Ogoni leaders. And I had a friendship that had developed from the time when I was at York University with a man who then subsequently became the first Nigerian professor of linguistics in Ife University. And he, by the way, when he was taught by a very eminent British English scholar, known as our great scholar of Shakespeare, and he told me about how you could, if you were a Nigerian student, you could never get A in English because you weren't English. That was reserved for the English. Anyway, I was doing British Council. I think someone here can connect British Council. I thank the British Council because in those days, the British Council used to take writers like me to different parts of the world. And they took me to a whole number of countries in Julia, in Africa, and then into the Middle East, and working with writers, which was absolutely phenomenal. So I was in Ghana, I was working in Ghana. In fact, Charlotte had come to join me, and my Nigerian friend said, why don't you come back via Lagos? They were in Lagos for a while. And so I thought, right, okay, took my flight through Lagos. It was an extraordinary weekend in which I was just absorbing and taking in. And I have to say, this friend of mine, who had hugely honourable man, and who then left academia because he felt that you should have honourable people in government, assassination attempt on him. Thank goodness he survived, but that again gave me a little bit of an idea. We writers are like crows, aren't we? We'll kind of pick up stuff and, and make the imagination go.
So I also know this is when you first began working with Jane Nissen, who's here today, and who I've just been able to meet, and read a lot of your correspondence and learned a lot about how important it is, And I think we've also talked about this today, how important it is to have an editor who will support you and challenge you.
And Sophie from Cinderella Live. Why don't I get 2 editors here? It's amazing.
So you got a huge amount of responses, and this is one of the things that I've looked at a lot, is the letters that you've got from readers, and I've been struck by the way that the really diverse and surprising ways that children engage with the books they read. Sometimes engaging with, sometimes resisting the message of the text, using it to spark their own creativity. I want to make sure that we have a bit of time to talk about Children of the Stone City, so I wonder if is it okay if I just cycle through these?
Go through.
So this is a lovely letter in response to, these are just some examples in response to Web of Lies, which is the sequel to The Other Side of Truth, and is a lovely example of someone relating to that novel in a really nice way. So I think it'd be really important to talk about this novel, for reasons that become very clear. So I think you're going to start out by reading us an extract from it, and then telling us a bit more about that novel and what inspired it.
This is a novel for which I felt my kind of South African background prepared me, and would I written, I don't know, but I was, well, we'll come to it in a minute. It's a novel about permitted and nons, and I have to say that I think we've got permitted and nons all around the world. Now, I think in this country I'm a permitted, I've become a permitted. And I've probably always been unpermitted in this country. I was able to pull out some grandparents who kind of come from here in order to get in the way my husband could not pull out those grandparents who came from here. So it is a question that's kind of bothered me over the years, and I think I'm trying to write that out here. Let me just read you the opening. Watch it. Adam zigzagged through the crowd, his violin case clutched against his chest. The soundtrack in his head was so dazzling, he could only dream of being good enough to play the solo himself. Ever since he heard the melody at last year's concert, he loved it. Not so fast, gasped Layla. She struggled to stay close to her brother as they entered the great gate, but he didn't hear. Even when they emerged in the noisy marketplace inside the Stone City, he was in such a hurry to turn into the cobbled side street that he didn't see the permitted policeman on horseback until too late. Alarm! Layla grabbed the grey canvas school bag on his shoulder. His violin case swung backward, narrowly missing the horse's front shin, and collided into her flute case. For a moment, Adam saw his own fright mirrored in the shining eyes of the horse. The policeman's eyes were hidden behind dark glasses. Watch it! Barked the permitted, tugging sharply on the reins, and he steered the huge stallion round the children. Its body was midnight black, except for 2 white shins and a white arrow down its forehead. For a moment, Adam felt sympathy for the harnessed creature, until he remembered seeing a woman's foot crushed by a horse like this one. And I think I'd just like to read you the last, he keeps a diary. His Uncle Elias has given him a book which he turns and has asked him to write it as a kind of diary. And he writes poetry, and he puts, often scaling through his violin. My dream. This is how it ends. In my grandparents' valley, a chestnut horse leads us to the stream. The sun shines and birds sing. We drink from the spring. In my grandparents' valley, there are no men with guns. The sun shines and birds sing. We play together, oud and violin. One day, in every valley, there will be no guns, no wars, no permits. The sun will shine and birds will sing. One day.
Yeah, we've got a couple more images to go through, but thank you for that lovely reading. So this novel is written in a I guess what I call an allegorical style. Would you say that's fair?
Very much so.
But the resonances with with events in the Middle East and in Israel and Palestine are really clear to me. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about again, the interactions with young people and the travel that inspired this novel.
Well, thanks again to the British Council. They took me into Amman, in Jordan in the year 2001. 9/11 had just happened. I got a phone call saying, "Do you still want to go?" I said, "Are you there?" They said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, well, I'm coming." And I did ask, I said, "Can you please also take me into one of these schools?" Because I knew that there were Palestinians in Jordan, generations, and I said, "Please take me also in the schools you put in, please take me to a Palestinian school." And they did that. And this was UNRWA's, there was a school for girls. I was asked the most philosophical questions that I've never been asked before. And some of them just remained in my head. One of them, which was asked by a girl, Mariam, one of the girls back there, and she said, "Is justice sleeping or is it a dream? If justice is sleeping, who will wake justice up?" Well, all I know is my answer must have been incredibly inaccurate. And it's 2001, and I kind of told myself, this is going to need a novel. First of all, I need to begin to understand where such a question, such a deep philosophical question about justice would come from. And so by 2013, and I can't laugh because when I heard SF Sayed with his wonderful tiger saying he began it in 2013, that's quite interesting, because I found my first notebook in which I started writing. I'm collecting a vast number of other writers, because writers invite you in. They invite you into your world in a way you can't just go up to someone and say, "Tell me about your world." But they invite you in. So the collection of Israeli and Palestinian writers I've been reading since 2013. And then in 2016, I thought, okay, time's right for me to actually go and meet some young people again and do some workshops with them. And this I went with Helen from IBBY Palestine, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, the libraries and gardens at the moment, you don't know, they're probably rubble. I've seen beautiful pictures of children, what's happened to those children. But there we were, in St. George's School and Radadel School, and the engagement of these young people, the desire to talk, and to talk about things that matter, just give that space, and to ask, and have honest conversations. So I had some of the most honest questions. They said, "Tell me, as a white person, does it break your heart what do people do, people have done to black people?" And so we're right in there. I think there's a reticence here, maybe we bring children up with a kind of reticence of what you can ask. But I just found it wonderful and amazing to be able to find myself thrown into those conversations, then thinking, right, okay, now how can I get on? Yeah, okay, and I'll tell you, and they'll say, "So what do your parents think?" All those kind of questions really coming and beginning to engage. So it's a privilege, really. I just think it's an amazing privilege to be able to go in and to have these questions posed to me.
I think we both of us, when we were talking about this, struggled to find an adequate way to end this talk, given the ongoing violence and ongoing horror in Gaza. But I wonder if you might, can you tell us a little bit about the parents? I think that's a good way to finish.
Thank you, Helen. I don't know if any of you know about the Parents Circle, but to me it's one of the most important organisations that's in Israel, Palestine. And these are parents who've lost a child to the other side. And the most remarkable people in there. And I mean, you may have heard of Rami El-Hanan, and who's married to Nurit El-Hanan, an educationist working in the Hebrew University, and who's done really important work around how Israeli children are brought up, with, I would say, the kind of blinkers that I was brought up in South Africa. In fact, that's how I first got in touch with Nurit, because I've done Censoring Reality. And if any of you want to see Censoring Reality, it's on my website, you can download it from there. But so I've been in touch with Nurit over that, but she and Rami lost their daughter to young Palestinian suicide bombers. And they, instead of kind of just the conventional thing, right, we'll get them, said, why would young people go and lose their lives, and be prepared to lose their lives, and they've taken our beloved, precious daughter with them. And Basam Aramin, so the parent circle is using a very traditional theatre forum technique in a circle, and you work in pairs. Palestinian, Israeli, Palestinian, Israeli, Palestinian, Israeli. And each one tells their story to the other. And when it's fed back to the room, you have to tell your partner's story, as if it's your story. And Rami was partnered with Bassam Aramin. Bassam Aramin, who'd done 7 years in an Israeli jail, who'd said that they were being shown a film about the Holocaust, about Auschwitz. He thought, oh, I'll go along to that and I'll have a good laugh. He went and he cried. And when he came out, he set up an organization called Competence for Peace. A year later, well, I'm not quite sure the timing of it, 10-year-old daughter in her school uniform, after school, sharing sweets with her friends, shot point blank range by an Israeli soldier. Now, Bassam told his story to Rami, Rami told his story to Bassam. And they completely connected. They regard each other as brothers. And they have spent the rest of their lives talking, going around talking to schools, to young people, and to any groups who will hear them about people. How many lives do we want to lose? You know, are we prepared? Are we? Or do we sit down and do we talk? And we begin to engage with each other? And so to me, they're probably the most important organization. And yes, I just want to be, you know, you can find them talking on YouTube. And by the way, they are protagonists of Colin McCann's magnificent novel, A Paragon. I've never read a novel like it because he's based it on 2 real people. And he clearly went and heard in the little monastery, I think not far from Bethlehem, he heard them talking together. And that became his novel, A Paragon, which is a mathematical shape. Very philosophical novel, quite extraordinary. So I would leave you with that. Look up the parent circle. Look up, read A Paragon. Let's read the world. Be kinder.
I'm not sure how are we for time. Do we have any time for questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks, Beverley.
Thank you, Helen.